welcome to episode 16 of Leadership Conversations with Krishna. And I'm pleased to have our guest today and who's been with us before as well, Dr. Badri Narayanan Gopalakrishnan, who's an economist and strategy leader. He's the founder of Infinite Sum Modeling, and today he joins us from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. He's there on a business trip. Dr. Badri spends his time across the world, but largely, across India and United States. Dr. Badri, welcome once again.
Thank you very much, Krishna. Nice to be in your show again.
Yeah, it's a great time to have this show again, right? And what a busy week it has been for India's trade and economic landscape, and I'm sure very busy time for economists like yourself. Not just the India EU trade deal, which is being called the mother of all deals, but then just after, as we were kind of sinking that in, we heard about the India US trade deal or trade agreement or whatever, right? So, how do you see this? Do you see India now being like the center of all trade deals now?
Thank you, Krishna ji. That's a great question. I completely agree with you. We are in really amazing times now. And particularly, I want to go little, back in time. Uh, you know, when we got independence, we started, uh, working on what we call as infant industry development, import substitution, and those kind of things. And we raised heavy tariff barriers and non-tariff measures and so on, so that we wanted to promote domestic industry for a very long time. And then we did not succeed so much in that, and our growth was very slow, and we could not raise people from poverty for a very long time, despite such a glorious past we have had in the last several centuries. So, and then in 1990, late 80s, early 90s, we started opening up, and we decided to open up our economy, both domestically and also globally, joining the WTO and so on. And when these things were done, and even today, since those days, there is a very large part of Indian industry and Indian media and Indian academia, which has been quite cynical about trade. Despite the progress we have made after opening up in terms of being a major global player, uh, you know, like the top five economies in the world, and so on. Because of this thought process and narratives that we have, which are which have not been very favorable towards trade, it has been very difficult in the last several decades to make major progress. So our India's share in global trade has been hovering around 1.7, 1.8%, which is very small, given that if you look at the economic history, in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, it was pretty much India and China that dominated the global trade. It was definitely more than a third of the global trade was dominated by India, and now we are such a small part of the global trade. And one of the main reasons for that is our lack of openness to trade. Only if you open up for your market for imports can you get the other countries to open up for exports. So we've always been in a bit of a mercantilist mode, which is basically to maximize our exports and minimize our imports. This can be a good strategy, but when you negotiate with countries, you have to be open. So this is like a broad, backdrop, from historical backdrop. In this backdrop, I would say that there have been a lot of back and forths on Indian policies with respect to trade, some opening up and then some closing down protectionism, increasing tariffs, and so on in the last few years too, even after the liberalization. Uh, and then, of course, there are pros and cons of doing that. I'll not get too deep into that. I'm not like a cheerleader of free trade. There are pros and cons. I'll not get too much into the details. But coming to what we are seeing today, the reason why we call this India EU free trade agreement as a mother of all trade deals is manifold. First, this particular trade agreement, India FTA, has been negotiated since pretty much since I started my post PhD career, which is around 2005, 6, 7, around that time. So it's like many people who do not know this recent history. They think that this deal was done in like a few days or few weeks. No, it's more than 20 years under negotiation, on and off. Like it was launched in 2006 7, and then it was suspended in 2013, and then again it was again relaunched in 2022. So, and a lot of people expected that even this time it will never happen for many reasons. One is EU has a very stringent, regulations and focus on environmental standards, labor standards, and many such things. So when I was at Niti Aayog, when I spoke to the European colleagues, whenever they say, when are we going to finish this deal? How is India going to respond to all this and so on? Uh, my message to them was that, when you have a trade agreement, you want to give and take.
Mm.
You cannot actually dictate terms and say that I believe in this, you also have to believe in this and so on. So when countries sign trade agreements, they do it because that trade agreement is going to give them greater market access than without the trade agreement. So that was, but then the EU was always insisting that if you have an FTA, we will reduce tariffs, but then we will all your exports have to follow all these regulations, labor standards, environmental standards, and a long list of regulations. So that was kind of a non-starter. Then we were thinking that if instead of doing this trade deal and getting all these regulations imposed, which will not only affect our exports to EU but also domestic production, we were a bit slow. We were thinking that let's get a good deal. So that kept going on, and then finally, and now because of this geopolitical aspects, with the US, pushing India to a corner with this very high tariffs and so on. And EU also has been quite, cynical about the US approach to trade in the recent past. So both countries, both EU as a region and India as a country, have been looking for some major breakthrough in trade. And what happened was the EU also came down a little bit uh, from their very rigid stances, and India also opened up, well with EU. It was a wonderful kind of collaboration between two democracies, and this trade agreement has come through. We will go through the some of the details as we go forward in this discussion. But I think this is the broad thing I wanted to mention. Like this is like huge part of the global trade, global economy, population. So many people are going to be benefited by this, and that's why it's called a mother of all deals.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that background, right? And I think you've also being part of some of the negotiation teams and seeing it closer. You have more experience there. What do you think? And you mentioned the United States angle, right? And some of the recent geopolitical economic developments being one of the reasons for fast forwarding this deal. But outside of the US angle, what are the other factors you think contributed to really fast forwarding this deal? Is it more to do with the European Union needing more stimulus to their economy, or is it India attracting a lot of these FTAs? Because And I want to take one step back, right? It's not just European Union or US. Before this, there was Oman, and then last year there was New Zealand and uh, UK, and then a few years back it was UAE, and then UAE also 2 weeks back, uh, although they signed the SEPA, but then they're saying that we're going to increase the trade much more, going forward. So, like, is it more to do with internal economics for both countries? Like, what do you think is the reason?
Beautiful question, Krishnadi. So basically, that's another aspect I wanted to, cover in my previous question as well. Um, when I talked about the history of India's trade policy stances, right? So I just very briefly mentioned that we have had, ups and downs even in the last few years, right? So one of the big changes that happened, I would say, starting just after COVID, was that we started a consistent and persistent positive, uh, you know, set of steps towards signing free trade agreements with many countries. And I was very, humbled and privileged to be part of that process, wherein, I had done a lot of analysis internally and some published where um, I could understand, like make the policymakers understand the importance of opening up and expanding market for exports and so on. So, like you said, we have a lot of trade deals. UAE was the first, and then I mean after COVID, like before that, we had many deals in the early 2000s. ASEAN FTA, for example, but that was actually quite criticized by a lot of people. Again, the anti-trade narratives were there, saying that these countries have taken advantage of the FTAs, but we have not been able to take advantage of that. And RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, we were part of that. That would have been like probably father of all trade deals because it had India, China, and many other countries in Pacific. So that would have been much bigger than, I mean, in purely in terms of population and even economic terms, that would have been bigger. But we withdrew uh, in like just before COVID, few couple of years before COVID. So the world was also confused about what is India doing. Like when India ventured into RCEP, uh, you know many countries were raising their eyebrows. So is it India is so ambitious to have a trade deal with China? In a group where China is there, and then we withdrew. So there was a bit of confusion on where India stands and so on. So now, after this, as I mentioned, after COVID, when we wanted to change that image and wanted to develop our image as a global trade mover and like a driver of the global trade and discussions and actions. So that's when we had this UAE trade deal, and that was like very ambitious in the sense that we opened up a lot of sectors. We got a lot of sectors opened by UAE as well, and UAE was thought of by many people as kind of a low-hanging fruit because they don't produce much, although they do re-exports, import and export, import and just export without much value addition. But we had a lot of checks and balances for that because there was a worry that they may just export things that which are very sensitive for us and dump our market. It has happened a little bit on things like jewelries and so on, but overall we've got some good deals with them, like rules of origin and so on. Then we had with Australia, and that was again very beneficial because we got a lot of mineral imports from Australia at low cost because of our tariff reductions. And Australia again is a good market. We also went beyond trade in terms of immigration. Also, Australia gave Indian citizens greater immigration possibilities and so on. So I can keep going on. There are many other deals, EFTA, like you said, uh, and other deals as well. But coming back to EU, I agree with you. EU domestic situation also, not only because of the Trump tariffs, but also generally they were going down because of, I would say, partly because of their excessive focus on regulations, environmental labor regulations, and so on, and lack of innovation because those regulations, even technology regulations, a lot of the regulations didn't give space for innovation and productivity growth in the EU, and that got them stagnated. And now they wanted more markets for their products, and they have to look into India and China, apart from the regular partners like US. So that definitely for they had a lot of push for like all the countries. Particularly, I know I can say about countries like Denmark, Sweden. These kind of countries are really stagnating. So they really wanted, and they're all very pro-trade countries. And these countries don't worry much about giving and taking. They just are willing to give full market access. Whatever we ask, they are willing to give. But broadly, like Germany and other bigger countries, they were kind of blocking, and France also. These kind of countries were, asking too much. So there was this kind of back and forth happening from the EU side, and from Indian side, we also were very cautious. We didn't want a deal that would affect our farmers or affect our small and medium enterprises. I remember when I was in the government, a lot of SMEs approached me saying that, oh, the EU is doing this, the EU is doing that. How are we going to survive there? We EU is an important market for us, and so on. So all these concerns were there. So we also had a little bit of, this was an urgent thing that we had to do, particularly when US was closing. If you take one example, even before the deal, this is a big deal. We had this a discussion about shrimp exports from India to US. That's one of the major export category to the US, and they were really affected, like really like almost killed overnight when the US imposed those tariffs. And we very quickly had a deal with EU where EU would import a lot of them. So we had some kind of mutual recognition of standards and so on. Because as I told you, EU more than tariffs, it's the standards. So we came up with an agreement where we recognized mutual standards. So that was a big news a few months ago. So that those kind of things were like trailers that okay, we can work together, we can do something big. And I when I was in the government, we also did a lot of discussions with EU. We've had a lot of strategic cooperation. Like for example, WTO is going, really in a bad direction. How can democracies like-minded democracies like EU and India work together? Whereas US has been not so cooperative. So we've been thinking a lot of different collaborations between the two countries. The domestic aspects you rightly pointed out. On domestic, I would say like in India we have this Atmanirbhar Bharat. Uh, and I think before this, we are also talking about your work on aerospace parts and so on. This is very important for India to have access to high tech and high R&D intensive commodities which we can import. And EU has that. I was talking about innovation, where EU has been lagging now. But when it comes to technology, R&D and technology, it's still good. When I say innovation, I'm more talking about the digital innovation. That's where they have a lot of difficulties. But when it comes to the engineering, science kind of innovation, they are still great. They have invested a lot. So we need access to that kind of thing, and also investment protection is one important thing that EU was looking for. If a company from EU comes to India, to what extent will India assure that they can the terms that are negotiated when they come in will stay? We won't withdraw. And that has happened in India in the past, some kind of policy inconsistency and so on, retrospective taxes, and a lot of companies that got affected. So you didn't want that. So all these different things, we wanted to give a policy, stability and openness, and EU wanted an entry here. EU also wanted another, large stable market for them, and we wanted this access to high tech stuff, and and also beyond all these things, there is also what you call as in simple terms we call it like visibility or photo op kind of thing, right? That's also at the minimum they wanted that. At the minimum we wanted, okay, we are game for trade. That's the big thing. But it's very deep, much deeper than that. It's not just like I used to use this term called low hanging fruits. When the Europeans approached me, I would say, please go with the low hanging fruits. If you really want to go really deep and so on, it's not going to. But they said, no, we want to go deep. ultimately it was a very deep deal. It has been a very deep deal. And Europeans, the nice thing about Europeans is they always publish everything they do. Very detailed documents are there. So I had a chance to look at them, and it's really amazing. Like a lot of details there and a lot of exemptions given to India. So it's great to get into the details which we can do.
No, that's really amazing to hear, right? And I totally agree. Like, if you put aside the digital aspect, Europe definitely on engineering, machinery, Europe is really advanced, right? And you mentioned some countries in Europe, like you said Denmark, Netherlands, France, Germany, and European Union also has so many countries, right? Like almost 20 plus. India also has many states, and each state is also different. Their needs are different, right? So maybe the needs of, like, let's say, Andhra Pradesh is very different from like Gujarat or Uttar Pradesh, right? Because I think the shrimp thing you were referring to is what I think largely affected Andhra Pradesh the most, right? So, from this India EU deal, which states you think will benefit the most? Like, if you can name three states you think will like benefit the most from this deal, and like in maybe for each of those states, if you could name like one industry.
Absolutely. I'll first talk about industries, then come to states. Uh, one of the most important industry is the automotive industry. So India has secured access for exports to the EU. So EU has reduced tariffs, and there are also some quotas. What you call as quotas. How much can you export? That also they have kind of reduced. I mean, increased. In the sense you can export more. And India has also given something similar. You know, but India's reductions are quite substantial. Like EU cars, like the luxury cars, like Benz and Mercedes Benz and BMW, Audi, we had 110% tariffs, but now it will be 10% tariffs, and it will be but with a quota. Like beyond that quota, it will still go up, but at least. And this is like 5 to 10 years. So it's a phasing out. And for electric vehicles, we also have opened up with some phasing out. And auto parts we have completely we are reducing in 5 to 10 years. So these are the really important. Motor vehicles sector is an important sector for both actually, for EU and for India. That was a very contentious sector also, because we are in some ways we are competing. I think in this I would say states like Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu will benefit a lot. My home state of Tamil Nadu, where Tamil Nadu is called Detroit of Asia, Detroit of India, with all this automotive industry. So we can benefit. Yes, there is some risk that particularly Maharashtra has. I know they have this Daimler Chrysler factory which makes Mercedes Benz and other kind of luxury cars. They may face a little bit of heat from this tariff reduction because of the luxury cars. But I'm pretty sure that uh, this quota will take care of it. Like beyond this quota, there is some 250,000 is the quota, and and there is much more demand for that. So there will still be room for the domestic. What I'm saying is that you can either import Mercedes-Benz from Germany, or you can buy the same Mercedes-Benz factory that exists in Pune, that can manufacture domestically. So I have to look into how they're going to manage this. Is going to be, are they going to just import or going to produce domestically? But just broadly speaking, I think we have enough competitiveness in this country to not worry about that. So our local Mercedes-Benz will still be big. Maybe some very fancy kind of very high-end stuff may still be imported, but the regular Mercedes-Benz will continue, and which is what we are already doing. There is no kind of competition. Like India manufactured Mercedes-Benz would be different from the German manufacturer. So there is no competition. The next sector I would think is machinery sector. Again, here also the states that would benefit is mostly Maharashtra, I would say, where there are a lot of these machineries, to some extent Tamil Nadu, Karnataka also to some extent. So here India is eliminating tariffs. Okay, two things here. One is these states I gave you, the examples I gave you, these are sectors would benefit from the market access in EU. India can export this. But then machinery, you should remember that machineries are needed for all industries in all states, right? So a lot of the machineries coming from EU can boost production, manufacturing in India. So we cannot make lot all machineries. India has not been such a major player in uh, machinery, some of the high-end machineries, right? So by reducing these tariffs, currently the tariffs are maximum tariffs for machineries coming from EU is like 44%, and that most of these products would come down to 0% tariffs, which means a great news for manufacturers across the country because they're going to they're going to buy high-end machineries 44% lower cost at 44% lower cost. This can actually help make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and so on. So this I would say from a point of view of exports, the couple of states I mentioned, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu can benefit. From a point of view of imports, pretty much all the states in India can benefit. Even state like UP, which is now has big ambitions to promote manufacturing, they can actually benefit states like that. Then there are chemical sector where both EU and India can benefit because we manufacture different types of chemicals, and there again I think uh, you know the same states maybe the addition of Andhra Pradesh is a big chemicals hub, both Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, both the states, and also I would think of some other states like Odisha, Bihar, which have a lot of minerals from where some of the chemicals depend on them. Even petroleum products. So in that, Gujarat also would come into picture. So these states would benefit in chemicals. Again, oil and petrochemical sector. Again, these Gujarat and Maharashtra will benefit a lot. So these are the states I can think of. Most of the discussions I like most of the examples I gave are from export point of view. The import point of view, I would say many states in India, almost all states in India can benefit. Whichever state is coming up with a vision for boosting manufacturing will benefit from this because they're going to get machineries, they're going to get a lot of other high-end inputs at lower cost.
No, that's really amazing to hear, right? And look, wherever manufacturing intensive states like Tamil Nadu, obviously Maharashtra, Karnataka, these are like more. Seems like they will benefit a lot with this deal. So, just shifting track, right? Just as we were celebrating and EU India was making all the headlines, right? And not just trade wise, but even politically, because, the two EU leaders were chief guests at our Republic Day function. But then suddenly, as that passed away from the news, we have this announcement of the India-US trade agreement. The US ambassador tweeted that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump spoke, and then President Trump, tweeted about an agreement, and Prime Minister Modi also reciprocated, thanking him for reduced tariffs. So, how did all this come about? Was this trade deal in works for some time and finalized now, or was it because of the EU deal that it was kind of pressurized the American side into going towards finalizing it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will just finish one small thing that I wanted to discuss before on EU and then come to the US. So EU, one important thing was the carbon taxes. EU has this carbon border adjustment mechanism, wherein if you're exporting certain products like cement, steel, and so on, aluminum, and so on, you have to pay carbon taxes, which is the first time any country is imposing carbon taxes across the border. And that was a big thing, like I was telling you earlier about the SMEs who are worried about EU. So this was also one of the things. So this was a big difficulty for all of the Indian policymakers. So, but US, since we are talking about US, that's why I remember this. The US also was concerned about it. And in the US EU trade deal they had a few months ago, They got some kind of, I would say, not exactly exemption, but some kind of a special treatment for the American exporters of these products. And now, interestingly, we also wanted that and we got that. And we got a little more. India got a little more than that. One thing is, of course, there is no exemption on the taxes. The taxes you still have to pay. But then you can, if you pay any, if India has any domestic carbon taxes, that will be deducted. So one possibility is that we may impose taxes domestically and collect that and use it for the domestic, welfare. So that is one thing. And second thing is there is the EU will also help India will provide some 500 million euros, transition fund, which will be helpful for the companies to, move in this direction, which they did not, obviously, they didn't provide it for US, but in India got that. And they'll also have a lot of SME support the Europeans are going to give for the SMEs to comply with this. There'll be local auditors. Indian auditors will certify this. Previously, they had to go to Europe, and all these things will save the costs. The reason I'm mentioning this is because it's a very important part of the India EU deal, and it was also touching upon the US EU deal, and now we can come to India US. So India US trade agreement again has been a very it has been discussed for a long time. I was fortunate to be part of some of the committees where the deal was being negotiated. So it started, I would say, from the Obama administration. Uh, that's when we before that, in Bush administration, we had the India-US nuclear deal, and in Obama administration we started this discussion started in Obama administration, and then when Trump administration came, it kind of got speeded up because the chemistry between the two leaders was so high, good that they wanted to conclude it. But then COVID came, so it got slow. And during the Biden administration, again, there was another effort, but it was not very big because under Biden administration, US was kind of similar to EU. So greater emphasis on labor standards, environmental standards, and so on. So it was difficult for India. And now with the current administration, we got all these big shocks of increase in tariffs and so on. So the finally we are still awaiting for the details of all this deal, but at least one good thing is from the 50% huge tariffs that it came down to 18% additional tariffs. So it is basically, I would say, it's not going to be a very comprehensive trade deal like what we got with the EU, but it is still a great breather for a lot of Indian exporters. I know I come from Coimbatore, where a lot of textile and apparel exporters are really struggling with these big tariffs. So now they're going to be better off. And similarly, the shrimp exporters we spoke about earlier. So many of these states, even UP, for example, they export a lot of carpets and some of the textile apparel materials. They are going to benefit. So it's going to be a good thing for all these industries. One big concern about US was that they were pushing India to open up the agriculture sector, particularly to GMOs. We have a very strict policy against genetically modified crops after the debacle we had with BT cotton and so on. It's an extremely sensitive issue for India. We don't have any details about it so far, but at least the minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, clarified that we haven't given up anything of that sort. Agriculture, the farmers are protected, and so on. So we have to wait for the details. But I think it is definitely a huge relief for all Indian industries, and also, in fact, the recent past there was so much concern about India-US relationship that many industries, like US-based companies coming to India, was becoming like they started hesitating because they didn't understand what is the policy stance of US vis-a-vis India. So is India becoming another China where it's difficult to it's better not to stay in, or how do we think about it? And there are, again, like the MAGA people, like a lot of the core supporters of Trump, they were also making a lot of statements against India, even including some people in the administration. So this was actually very difficult. India-US relation was going through some of the toughest times. I think in the way this happened, I would say most of this credit goes to the Indian government because they unlike even countries like Canada and uh, some of the other countries which are very, even China, which were very kind of retaliatory, like when Trump imposed those tariffs, they also reciprocated, and that only led to kind of a trade war, like further escalation happened with those kind of countries. Mexico also did that. So India did not do that. So we silently managed that. Whenever there was a positive news from US, Prime Minister supported that. Whenever there was negative, we kept quiet. But behind the scenes, we kept pushing. And but then the reason we were expecting this to happen last year, when the Liberation Day tariffs was announced, one of the first countries that even President Trump mentioned about negotiations was actually India. So a lot of people thought that okay, even the liberation rate tariffs are not very high for India compared to many other countries. So we thought okay, we would be uh, even these tariffs will go away. But that didn't happen. We were expecting October, November, December, every month we were expecting by this month then we'll have the deal. But fortunately, it happened now. But I think the patience and the diplomacy and the maturity that's shown by Indian government is really commendable. It was pretty much like there were like so many, times, Trump administration colleagues, they spoke about stopping the India-Pakistan war or, uh, the India not buying enough agricultural products from the US, uh, and India being tariff king. So we heard a lot of these kind of things, and it was very difficult for Indian government to stay restrained. We also, again, politically speaking, the government also has to manage the narratives within India. Like if you're not speaking up, does it mean that we are agreeing with all allegations coming from there? So it's a very difficult, kind of a tight rope walk kind of thing, which India really managed well. And I think not escalating, not responding to all the ridicules and difficult comments from the other side, and also at the same time positively welcoming any small positive step taken by the US administration.
Yeah.
So all this led to this, and we still made sure that which is something we have to see, wait and see the details as to how we have safeguarded our industries. Uh, I think it's we are in a when it comes to US. It was more like a consolation thing. Like we were in a very difficult spot, and now we are in a better spot. It's not. I wouldn't say it's something to really yeah, it's not like the EU deal where it was a real big deal. Here it is more like a major consolation that we all got. So and in fact, the world was almost thinking, even India, even a lot of people in India and even the US, they're almost thinking that we are going to learn to live without each other. And it was almost like that. So many Indian companies started looking at other countries as destinations. India also, like that's the EU deal itself is a good example. Like that was one of the reasons why that was speeded up. But now that this has happened, I think it's good. In a way, I would say, like this byproducts like EFTA being completed and EU deal and so on, it's a byproduct of the US tariffs. And in a way, India also needed that kind of a push to say that, okay, we have to open up the market. This is not the time to, do too much protectionism. So I think overall, it's with the limited information that we have now, I think it's a wonderful uh, deal. If you compare this 18% that we got now, if you compare it with other countries, we are really pretty good actually compared to many other countries. And I was in Japan recently. Japan had 15%, and actually, when I did the analysis for that, I found that Japan would actually gain because of these tariffs. Because when other countries are facing 20%, 30%, you are facing only 15%, 20%, then actually on the margin, because Americans are great consumers. I mean, there is still no sign of any kind of recession or anything there. They are consuming a lot. So if they increase tariffs on one country, they're going to look at another country which is supplying goods at a lower cost. So now, so far, India was the other country which was whose products were expensive. Now India will be one of the competitive countries. So I think despite the fact that this 18% is a big number, we are in a much better position than many other countries. Yeah, I think those are the points I had about the India-US deal. But I sincerely hope that in future we'll have a really good deal, more than just a makeshift deal. This is more like a makeshift deal. So we want a deeper cooperation with the US. That I hope this will pave way to that. That was the kind of deal that we were expecting last few years, and hopefully that will come up in the next few years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Very well summarized and said. I think you are right about the maturity and leadership shown by Indian government and Prime Minister Modi. They were able to manage the domestic politics, optics also, and still come out very positively, right? And I also think that somewhere down the line, despite all whatever happened last few months, that the I think the good solid friendship or relationship, whatever you call it, between the two leaders, right, President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, somewhere I think that also helped achieve this mini deal or whatever you call it, right? So that I think they maintained that friendship despite some ups and downs that we've seen overall, right? But coming to other part of that deal, right? One was obviously the reduction of 50% tariffs to 18%. But the other was that there could be possibility of increasing imports from US to like $500 billion over the next 5 years, right? Now, I'm not exactly sure about current numbers, but I think somewhere we're probably, I mean, we as in India is probably uh, importing like 40-50 billion, I think, as of today, if you look at last year. So it's pretty significant if you see. So is that realistically possible? Like, can oil and gas contribute to that? What
You
is, how, what
know,
do you see that? Yeah.
in this trade deals, it's very difficult to set a target of any number, right? So when you do this trade deal, we must understand that neither US nor India is like China or Russia, right? Where they can control what is coming in, what is going on, right? So we are democracies. We have free market, pretty much free market, both countries. So this is more like President Trump is ambitious. He says that let's do that, but there is nothing forcing India to do that. And like you rightly said, it's if you say the sum total of 5-10 years trade is that much, we can probably achieve that. I mean, the US can achieve that. But for one year, going to that level of trade is impossible, at least in the near future, right? So of course, US is now building its own industry, rebuilding manufacturing and so on. But still, 10x increase is very unrealistic. But I think definitely, more American inputs coming to Indian manufacturing is a good thing. If you think, for example, NVIDIA chips and so on, right? So they have restrictions on how much to sell to China. They had a deal on that and so on. So there are certain things that we may benefit from, like importing more. You were talking about oil, gas, maybe that's also like LNG is something we import. One of the potential exporters for us could be the US, liquefied natural gas. So yeah, those are all there. But I don't. I think we should not take these numbers too seriously, unless there is a US uh, Department of Commerce report which comes up with the rationale how they are expecting this and so on, which they do. Generally, the good thing about the US government is similar to the EU. They publish large reports, like for any even when they increase tariffs, they have like 400 pages, 300 pages reports. So we may wait for that to happen from their side, and from our side also we need to wait for more clarification. So But yeah, but the short answer to your question is these kind of numbers are not. Political leaders say that to say that we are going to increase a lot and so on, right? But there is no hard commitment that can be made. Even if you take EFTA, like India did a pretty good job with that. EFTA FTA, that European Free Trade Area FTA that India concluded, I think last year. There, India actually did something similar to this, but it's more of a hard commitment. What India said is EFTA has very low tariffs already, but India has high tariffs. So if India has to reduce, let's say, 20% to 0%, and EFTA has 1% to 0%, so why would India do that? If you are reducing your tariffs from 1 to 0, I am reducing from 20 to 0, and I'm giving you more than what I'm getting from you. So what India said was, okay, if you really to make this FTA something meaningful, you guys should make some big commitments. If EFTA. So then we went for this investment commitments. We said EFTA should invest in India for, I forgot the number, of several $billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. They have to invest in the next X years, 5 years or whatever. If they don't do it, there will be a mechanism. We'll sit together and say that you haven't reached the investment commitment you made, so we may increase the tariffs. The tariff reductions we gave will be taken back. Yeah, there are debates. I know I'm not a lawyer, so some lawyers say that it's a very soft commitment. Some say it's hard. So probably at least it can go to the court or wherever, like when there is a debate dispute. So, but what I'm saying is that is in the text. This is in the text. Like how much commitment, I don't know, but at least it is mentioned in the text. So with the US, I don't know whether they can have that kind of a text for exports. Investment is a different story. Exports, we don't know. So
Yeah, with that, we come to the end of this podcast episode. But as always, it was pleasure to talk to you, Dr. Badri, and listen to your inputs on India Europe FTA and also the India US agreement. It's a great time, right, to be a part of the way geopolitics politics is going on. Like on one side, you have countries kind of coming apart, but on the other side, India is able to attract different countries and have dialogue with them, have trade with them. So that that's really great to see. And as a Indian, definitely it's positive also to see, right, how India is able to be that magnet, right? Yeah, thank you again, Dr. Badri, for sharing your insights here.
thank you very much, Krishnan. It was wonderful talking to you as always. I look forward to more opportunities in the future to collaborate. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.